How to recognize emotional manipulation in relationships. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where, over time, you started questioning your own thoughts, emotions, and even memories of what happened? Maybe you've been in a situation where you apologized for something you didn't even do, or found yourself making excuses for someone else's actions, even though you knew something didn't feel right. You might have even been told that you're overreacting or you're too sensitive, leaving you feeling confused, as if you were the one at fault. It's like living in a constant fog, where you're unsure about your own reality. And what makes it worse is, sometimes, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when things started going wrong. Over time, you might even start doubting your own perceptions, your emotions, and ultimately, your sense of self-worth. This is the reality of emotional manipulation, and it's more common than most people realize. It's not about someone yelling at you or being physically aggressive. In fact, emotional manipulation is often quiet, sneaky, and hidden behind smiles, affection, and even love. The most dangerous part is that it doesn't leave any visible scars. It can go on for months, even years, without you even realizing that it's happening to you. You may have heard the term gaslighting, but it's not just about someone denying what they've said or done. It's about making you question your own sanity, your perception of reality, and your self-worth. It's about making you feel like you're losing control over your own thoughts, when in fact, it's someone else who's been controlling them all along. Have you ever found yourself apologizing when you weren't the one in the wrong, or feeling guilty for doing something that didn't even hurt anyone? Maybe you've been made to feel like you were the one causing the problems, when deep down, you knew something wasn't right. Or perhaps, you've been told you're too sensitive or too emotional for voicing your feelings, only to be made to feel like you're the problem. It's a cycle that eats away at your sense of self, and before you know it, you might even begin to believe them. The truth is, emotional manipulation isn't always obvious. It can start with something small, maybe a comment, an accusation, or a joke that doesn't quite sit right with you. But over time, it grows. Slowly, you start second-guessing yourself, your reactions, and your boundaries. You may start to wonder, am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Did I say something wrong? But the truth is, these questions are often planted in your mind by someone who wants to keep you uncertain, unsure, and dependent on them for validation. Think about your relationships. Whether it's a romantic partner, a friend, or even family, have you ever felt drained after spending time with someone? Not in the sense of physical tiredness, but more in the emotional sense. Have you ever questioned yourself after a conversation, wondering if you were wrong for feeling the way you did or for standing up for yourself? Emotional manipulation can leave you feeling like you're walking on eggshells, uncertain of what's real and what's not. This type of manipulation is not only toxic, but it's also damaging, and the effects can be long-lasting. Emotional manipulation can make you feel like you're constantly on the defense. It makes you doubt your own thoughts, your self-worth, and eventually, your ability to trust your own emotions. And the worst part is, it makes you feel like you're the only one who doesn't understand what's happening. But here's the thing. Recognizing emotional manipulation is the first step in taking back control over your life and relationships. It's not about blaming yourself or thinking you're weak for allowing it to happen. It's about understanding that these behaviors are designed to confuse and control you. And once you understand them, you can start to protect yourself. You might be thinking, this all sounds so familiar, but how do I know if I'm really being manipulated or if I'm just overthinking things? The answer lies in recognizing the patterns, those small, subtle moments when someone dismisses your feelings, undermines your self-esteem, or shifts the blame onto you. Emotional manipulators often make you question your reality, your emotions, and even your boundaries. They make you feel like you have to prove yourself, constantly defending your worth, even though you shouldn't have to. So, I want you to take a moment and think about the relationships in your life. Maybe it's a friendship where you always feel drained, or a romantic relationship where you're unsure about your emotions. Think about times when you've been told you were too sensitive, or made to feel guilty for things that were out of your control. Have you ever felt like you're constantly apologizing for being yourself? Have you ever wondered if you're overthinking, only to realize later that you weren't imagining things at all? If any of this resonates with you, it's time to recognize that emotional manipulation could be a part of your life, whether you've been aware of it or not. But here's the good news. You are not alone, and you do not have to accept this behavior. The first step is simply awareness. Once you start recognizing the signs, you'll begin to see the patterns, and that's when the real healing can begin. This is a journey towards reclaiming your emotional well-being, your boundaries, and your peace of mind. It's about learning to trust yourself again, to stand up for your feelings, and to recognize when someone is trying to make you feel like you're the one at fault. I want to ask you to think back, reflect on past relationships or current ones, and ask yourself, have I ever felt manipulated, unsure of my own feelings, or made to feel responsible for someone else's emotions? If the answer is yes, it's time to understand why this is happening, and more importantly, how you can break free. Let's start with one of the most powerful emotional manipulation tactics, gaslighting. This is one of the most damaging tactics because it makes you question your own reality, your memory, and your perception. It leaves you wondering if you're losing your mind, when in fact, it's the manipulator who's been twisting the truth all along. Gaslighting, the art of making you doubt yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where you've clearly seen something happen, but when you mention it, someone tries to convince you that it didn't? Maybe it's something small, like a comment that was made or a conversation that took place, but when you bring it up, they deny it, act confused, or even make you feel like you're the one with the problem. You might start thinking, did I imagine that? Did I misunderstand? But deep down, you knew what you saw, what you heard, and how you felt. Yet, somehow, you begin to second-guess everything. This is the heart of gaslighting, one of the most insidious forms of emotional manipulation. It's a psychological tactic where someone deliberately distorts your perception of reality, making you doubt your own memory, your thoughts, and even your sanity. Gaslighting isn't just about denying something that happened. It's about manipulating you to the point where you no longer trust your own mind. It starts subtly. Maybe it's a partner telling you that you're remembering something wrong, or a friend insisting that you misinterpreted their words. It might seem innocent at first, just a small miscommunication. But over time, the gaslighter keeps pushing these distortions until you start to feel like you're losing touch with reality. They make you feel crazy, and eventually, you begin to believe it. You question your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own version of events. The manipulator gets what they want. Their version of reality becomes the only truth, and you're left feeling powerless. Let's say you had a conversation with someone about a topic that was important to you. You remember clearly expressing your feelings, and they seem to understand. But later, when you bring it up again, they tell you that you never said it, or they twist your words to make it sound like you were being unreasonable. They'll tell you, I never said that. You're imagining things, or you're being too sensitive. Over time, you begin to doubt your own memory. Maybe I didn't say that. You wonder, maybe I did overreact. This constant undermining of your reality can be incredibly damaging. At first, you might think it's just a misunderstanding. But as it continues, it starts to eat away at your confidence. It chips away at your sense of self-trust. The more often it happens, the harder it becomes to tell if you're seeing things clearly or if you've been tricked into thinking you're losing your grip on reality. The most dangerous part of gaslighting is that it's a slow burn. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of planting seeds of doubt in your mind until you're no longer sure of anything. You start to feel like maybe you are the problem. Maybe you are too emotional. Maybe you are just imagining things. It gets to the point where you apologize, not because you did something wrong, but because you've been convinced that you did. You begin to question everything, your actions, your reactions, and your sanity. One of the most common gaslighting tactics is when someone constantly denies things that are clearly true. They might say, that never happened, or you're making that up, even though you know for sure it did. This causes confusion, and over time, the more you're told that what you saw or heard wasn't real, the less confident you become in your own ability to trust your perception. Your reality is no longer your own. It's been hijacked, and you've been made to feel like you're the one who is wrong. Let's take an example. Imagine you've planned something important with your partner. It could be something small like a dinner date or something bigger like attending a family event. You're looking forward to it, but when the time comes, they cancel or they make an excuse. When you bring it up later, they tell you, "I never agreed to that. You must have misunderstood." At first, you might just think it was a slip-up. But when this happens repeatedly, when they constantly deny things that happened, when they invalidate your feelings, when they make you question your memory, then it's no longer just a mistake. It's manipulation. Gaslighting can also happen when someone distracts you from the issue at hand by turning the tables and making you feel like you're being unreasonable. They might say, "Why are you getting so upset over something so small? This isn't a big deal." They shift the blame onto you for being upset, making you feel like your reaction is the problem, not their behavior. You're left feeling guilty, confused, and ashamed for feeling the way you do. The toll of gaslighting can be deep and long-lasting. The constant undermining of your reality can lead to self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and a diminished sense of self-worth. It can feel like you're trapped in a loop where you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. It can lead to emotional exhaustion because you're constantly second-guessing yourself, wondering if your feelings and thoughts are valid. So how do you recognize gaslighting in your own life? The first step is understanding that if you consistently feel confused, self-doubting, or questioning your own perceptions, gaslighting might be at play. If you notice a pattern of someone constantly denying your version of events, if they make you feel like you're losing your mind, or if they constantly twist things to make you feel like you're the problem, then gaslighting is likely occurring. And the next step is to take a step back and trust your feelings. Your emotions are valid. Your perception is valid. You are not crazy. When you recognize that you're being gaslighted, it's important to detach emotionally from the manipulator. Start keeping a record of events, conversations, and how you're feeling. Documenting things can help you see the truth clearly when someone tries to distort it. The most important thing you can do is trust your instincts. You know your own reality, and you don't need anyone to make you question that. Gaslighting is one of the most harmful manipulation tactics because it gets into your mind and makes you doubt your own truth. But once you recognize it, you can start to take steps to protect yourself. You can set boundaries, communicate clearly, and remove yourself from situations where your reality is being manipulated. The next part of this journey is learning how to deal with gaslighting and protect your emotional well-being. But for now, take a moment to think about your own relationships. Have you ever experienced gaslighting? Have you ever felt like you were questioning your reality or sanity because of someone else's actions? Recognizing this is the first step in breaking free from manipulation and reclaiming your emotional power. Guilt tripping, making you feel responsible for their emotions. Have you ever been made to feel guilty for something that wasn't your fault? Maybe you found yourself apologizing for someone else's bad day or their emotional reaction, even when you had no control over the situation. It's a tactic known as guilt tripping, and it's one of the most manipulative ways people use your emotions against you. At its core, guilt tripping is about making you feel responsible for someone else's emotions, actions, or problems. It's a way of shifting the burden of their feelings onto your shoulders, making you feel guilty for simply existing or for being true to yourself. Imagine this. You're out with your friends, having a great time. You've been looking forward to this evening all week. But when you get home, your partner is upset. They tell you they feel abandoned and accuse you of not caring about them because you spent time with people other than them. Suddenly, you're left feeling guilty. Guilty for enjoying a night out, guilty for needing space, and guilty for doing something that doesn't involve them. You didn't do anything wrong, yet they've twisted the situation to make you feel like you owe them an apology. The problem with guilt tripping is that it shifts the focus from the manipulator's actions to your supposed shortcomings. Instead of addressing their own emotional needs or communication issues, they make you feel like you're responsible for fixing everything. You become the person who has to carry the weight of their emotions, even though their feelings aren't something you created. It's not always as overt as blaming you outright. Often, guilt tripping can be more subtle, phrased as a question or a joke, but with an underlying tone that suggests you're to blame. For example, someone might say, "I guess I'm just not as important to you as your friends are," or "I thought you cared about me, but I guess I was wrong." These kinds of comments aren't direct accusations, but they create a sense of obligation. You're made to feel like you're letting them down, even though there's no real reason for you to feel guilty. The real danger here is that, over time, you begin to believe it. You might start thinking that you have to prioritize their feelings above your own. You begin to neglect your needs, your desires, and your happiness, just to make sure they're happy. But this doesn't just lead to resentment. It leads to emotional exhaustion. You give and give, yet no matter how much you give, it's never enough. They find new ways to make you feel guilty, and before long, you begin to lose sight of your own emotional needs. Think about a time when you've been guilt-tripped. Maybe it was something small, like canceling plans, or something bigger, like prioritizing your job or family over your partner's wishes. Did you find yourself apologizing, even though it wasn't really your fault? Did you start questioning whether you were being too selfish for putting your needs first? If so, you've experienced guilt tripping, and it's not just emotionally draining, it's manipulative. One of the most common forms of guilt tripping happens when someone makes you feel responsible for their happiness. They might say things like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this," or "I can't believe you're doing this to me." These statements aren't just about expressing disappointment. They're about creating emotional pressure to make you act in a certain way. The goal is to get you to feel obligated to meet their needs, even at the expense of your own comfort or happiness. The manipulation becomes even more dangerous when the guilt tripping is tied to love. A manipulative person might say, "I thought you loved me, but if you really did, you wouldn't do this." They tie their emotional well-being to your actions, making you feel like their love for you is conditional on your compliance with their needs. You may not even realize it, but every time you give in to these guilt trips, you lose a little bit more of yourself. It's like you're being chipped away piece by piece, until you've completely abandoned your own desires and values just to keep the peace. You're constantly in emotional debt to someone, feeling as though you owe them something just for existing. So, how can you stop this cycle? The first step is to recognize when guilt tripping is happening. If you notice that someone is consistently trying to make you feel responsible for their feelings or actions, that's a clear red flag. You have to remind yourself that their emotions are not your responsibility. Their happiness doesn't fall on your shoulders. It's important to validate your own feelings and know that it's okay to prioritize yourself. If someone is trying to make you feel guilty for taking care of your own needs, it's time to set a boundary. You don't have to apologize for doing what's best for you. In fact, it's healthy to make sure that you have your emotional space, your time, and your own interests. You deserve that just as much as anyone else. The next time someone tries to guilt trip you, stand firm in your boundaries and remind yourself that it's okay to say no. If the guilt tripping becomes a regular pattern, it's crucial to have an open conversation with the person. Express how their behavior makes you feel and how it's affecting your emotional well-being. However, remember that it's important to set limits in these conversations. If someone is consistently trying to manipulate you through guilt, they may not be receptive to healthy boundaries. At that point, you need to assess whether this relationship is still serving you in a positive way. At the heart of guilt tripping is control. The manipulator wants to keep you emotionally dependent on them, so they create an environment where you feel guilty for wanting or needing anything other than them. The goal is to shift the focus from their actions to your perceived shortcomings. The more they can make you feel guilty, the more power they have over you. But you are not responsible for their emotions. You are not their emotional caretaker. It's time to take back control of your own emotional landscape, and part of that is refusing to carry their emotional burden. It's okay to prioritize your well-being without feeling guilty for doing so. Control tactics, restricting freedom and choices. Have you ever felt like someone was trying to control what you do, who you talk to, or how you spend your time? Maybe they subtly influenced your decisions, or worse, made you feel guilty or ashamed for making choices that were important to you. It's not always obvious at first, but slowly, someone can begin to control the very way you live your life, and before you know it, you're trapped. At first, these actions might seem like care or concern. A partner might say things like, "I just don't think you should go out with your friends tonight. I don't feel comfortable with it." Or, "I'm worried about you hanging out with people I don't know." These might seem like normal concerns, but over time, they start to feel like requests that can't be denied. What's worse, you begin to feel guilty for doing something that you enjoyed, something that brought you joy, simply because the other person doesn't approve. It starts with small things, being told where to go, who to see, or how to spend your free time. But these small requests quickly snowball into a bigger pattern. What started as a simple suggestion becomes a demand, and soon, you find yourself sacrificing your freedom and independence, all because you don't want to upset them. You begin to feel like you owe them that time, that attention, and that approval, because they've made you believe it's your responsibility to keep them happy. Control tactics can look different depending on the relationship, but they all have one thing in common. They make you feel like your needs don't matter, that their comfort is more important than your own happiness. The manipulator makes sure you know that their emotions are tied to your behavior. Think about times when you've been in a relationship where you felt guilty for taking time to yourself, for pursuing your own hobbies or interests. Have you ever been told, "You never make time for me," or "You always choose your friends over me"? This is where the manipulation begins, by shifting responsibility for their happiness onto you. The goal is to make you feel responsible for their emotions, their needs, and their sense of security. But the truth is, you are not responsible for their emotions. They are responsible for their own happiness, just as you are responsible for yours. Yet, the manipulator uses their insecurities to control your behavior, often making you feel like you owe them that emotional validation. Over time, this starts to erode your boundaries. What once felt like a simple request becomes a manipulative tactic to ensure you only do what they want. You start to lose sight of your own desires, your own sense of freedom, and you're left wondering why it feels so hard to say no. Here's another example. You might have had a partner or close friend who insisted that you spend every free moment with them, or who subtly discouraged you from spending time with others. They might say, "Why do you want to go out without me? You know I don't like being alone," or "You always choose other people over me." Slowly, you start to feel like you have to justify your actions to them. You feel guilty for doing things that make you happy, and eventually, you may even start canceling plans, compromising your own interests, and feeling like you're walking on eggshells to avoid making them upset. The control tactics don't always come in the form of direct demands. Sometimes, it's about creating a sense of obligation, like you're indebted to them for their time or affection. You might feel like, "I should do this for them because they've done so much for me," even when those actions were done with strings attached. What you don't realize is that these manipulative behaviors are designed to make you feel like you're the one who has to compromise in order to keep the peace, all while they get their way. And when you start pushing back, that's when the manipulator may play the victim card. They might say, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this," or "I guess you don't love me enough to make this sacrifice." This is another tactic to make you feel guilty for wanting to keep your boundaries intact. They try to paint you as the bad person for wanting to maintain your independence, to have your own space, or to pursue your own life. They make it emotionally uncomfortable to say no, making you feel like you have to give in, just to avoid the guilt or pressure they're putting on you. Over time, the emotional manipulation begins to feel suffocating. You start to feel like you're walking around with a constant weight on your shoulders, like you can't do anything without upsetting them, without sacrificing your own happiness. This is the result of emotional control. When you start making decisions based on someone else's needs instead of your own, when your desires, your goals, and your personal space are consistently pushed aside. So how do you stop this? First, it's important to recognize the signs of control. If someone is constantly telling you what you can or can't do, who you can spend time with, or how you should live your life, that's a huge red flag. Recognizing this behavior is the first step in protecting yourself. You don't have to feel guilty for wanting to live a life that's true to you. You don't have to apologize for wanting time to yourself, for wanting to see your friends, or for pursuing your passions. And if the person continues to manipulate you, it's time to reevaluate the relationship. It's important to ask yourself, is this person respecting my boundaries? Are they valuing me as a whole person? Or are they only interested in what I can give them? Relationships should be about mutual respect and support, not control and manipulation. If you find yourself in a relationship where you're constantly sacrificing your own happiness for someone else's, it's time to take a step back and think about whether this relationship is serving your best interests. Love bombing, too much too soon. Have you ever been in a relationship where everything seemed too perfect, almost like a fairy tale? Maybe the person you were seeing showered you with affection, surprises, and compliments right from the start. They told you they couldn't live without you and made you feel like the most important person in their life. At first, it felt exciting and romantic. The attention was intoxicating, and you felt like you were truly special. But somewhere along the way, things started to feel off. The affection became overwhelming, the pressure started to build, and suddenly, you felt like you were suffocating. This is the tactic known as love bombing, one of the most manipulative strategies used to gain control in relationships. It starts with an overwhelming rush of affection, compliments, and attention. The manipulator makes you feel like you're the center of their world, bombarding you with messages, gifts, and constant praise. They want to make you feel like you've found the one, someone who understands you completely, someone who loves you more than anyone else could. But here's the catch. Love bombing isn't about genuine love. It's a tactic used to manipulate your emotions and gain control. The manipulator floods you with love and attention to create a sense of dependency, to make you believe that you cannot live without them. They overwhelm you with affection to quickly build a bond, making you feel like they're your soulmate, someone you can trust with everything. At first, it feels amazing. You might think, this is how love is supposed to feel. They're constantly there, texting, calling, making grand gestures, and letting you know how much they care. It seems too good to be true, and that's because it is. When the manipulator has gotten you emotionally hooked, they begin to pull back. The love bombing stops, and you're left wondering what went wrong. What starts out as excessive affection quickly shifts into emotional manipulation. Once the manipulator feels secure in their hold over you, the affection fades. Suddenly, you're left craving the love they once showered you with, but now, they start to play games. They may become distant, give you the cold shoulder, or act aloof. And that's when you start chasing them, trying to get back the affection you once had. They keep you in this emotional cycle, constantly making you feel like you need their love to survive. Have you ever been in a relationship where someone made you feel like you were the most important person in the world, only for them to suddenly pull away? Maybe they would tell you how much they loved you, but when you needed them, they were nowhere to be found. They might act like they care about you deeply, but then show little to no effort when it comes to supporting you emotionally. Love bombing doesn't just manipulate your emotions. It creates an unhealthy attachment, making you feel like you need their affection to feel validated. But what's even more dangerous is that love bombing can create a toxic dynamic where your emotional well-being becomes entirely dependent on the manipulator. The more they pull away, the more you try to earn their love by changing your behavior, seeking validation, and neglecting your own needs just to keep them interested. You start to feel like you're walking on eggshells, trying to figure out what you did wrong, when in fact, it's the manipulator who has set up this emotional trap. Why do they do this? The goal is control. Love bombing creates an intense emotional connection in a short amount of time. By doing this, the manipulator ensures that you'll be emotionally dependent on them, constantly seeking the affection they once gave you. And as soon as they have you hooked, they begin to withdraw, leaving you in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. You crave their love and attention, but it feels like you're always chasing something that's just out of reach. One of the most dangerous aspects of love bombing is that it distorts your sense of reality. It makes you feel like you're living in a dream, but the dream is built on false promises. You begin to believe that their excessive affection is a reflection of genuine love. The manipulator has expertly woven a narrative where you feel special and unique, but in reality, they've just created a cycle of emotional dependency that makes it harder for you to leave. Recognizing love bombing is crucial to breaking free from this manipulation. If you notice someone showering you with affection, but their behavior is inconsistent or they become emotionally distant when you need them the most, take a step back. True love doesn't demand constant praise and validation. It's built on mutual respect, emotional availability, and consistency. In a healthy relationship, affection grows over time and doesn't come with strings attached. So, how can you protect yourself from being love-bombed? Start by taking things slow. Observe their actions rather than being swept away by the intensity of their words and gestures. If someone is professing deep love for you too quickly, question whether their actions align with their words. Healthy relationships are built on a foundation of trust, mutual respect, and steady emotional growth, not overwhelming affection that fades once you're hooked. If you feel like you've been love-bombed, it's important to take time for self-reflection. Are you feeling dependent on their affection? Are you constantly seeking validation from them? This is a sign that you've fallen into the trap of manipulation. Recognize that you don't need someone's affection to feel worthy. You are already complete, with or without their validation. The most important step in breaking free from love bombing is trusting yourself. You deserve a relationship where love is given freely, consistently, and without the emotional games. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not for how much someone can emotionally manipulate you. Isolation, cutting you off from your support system. Have you ever noticed that, in certain relationships, the more you spend time with others, the more guilt you feel about it? Maybe it's when you talk to a friend or family member, and your partner or close friend becomes distant or upset, almost as if your attention belongs only to them. At first, you might think it's just a little jealousy, but over time, you start feeling as though you're being pulled away from the people who matter most to you. This is emotional manipulation at its core, and it's called isolation. Isolation doesn't always look like it does in movies. It's not always about locking someone away from the outside world. No, isolation is much more subtle. It can be as simple as one person trying to control who you see, when you see them, and how much time you spend with them. Slowly, you might find yourself drifting away from your friends, your family, and the activities that once brought you joy, all because someone else is making you feel guilty for pursuing them. You're told that they feel neglected or that they're the only one who truly understands you. And over time, you begin to believe it. The first sign of isolation is the emotional manipulation that comes with it. It's not always direct criticism. Instead, it often begins with subtle suggestions. They might say things like, "I really don't feel comfortable when you go out with them," or, "You know, I feel a little left out when you spend time with your friends." At first, you may brush it off as nothing serious. You think, "They just want me to be with them more." That's normal, right? But this small comment starts to stick with you. You start wondering if you're being unfair by spending time with others, or if your partner really needs you more. The pressure builds over time, and before you know it, you're limiting the time you spend with your support system, just to avoid making them feel bad. You might even justify it by telling yourself that this person needs you more than anyone else. You convince yourself that your relationships with friends and family aren't as important, or that their needs come first. And bit by bit, your world becomes smaller, more insular, and increasingly dependent on the manipulator. But here's the truth. Isolating you from others is a tactic used to gain more control. When the manipulator successfully isolates you, they weaken your support system, making it easier for them to control your decisions, your actions, and even your sense of reality. They want to be your everything, your emotional support, your confidant, and your entire social circle. The less you have outside of them, the more power they have over you. Think about it. Have you ever been in a situation where you started feeling guilty for spending time with friends, even when you hadn't done anything wrong? Maybe they said, "You never make time for me anymore," or, "I don't know why you hang out with them so much." I'm right here. These comments might seem like harmless complaints at first, but they are powerful tactics to get you to question your loyalty. The more you doubt yourself and your relationships, the more likely you are to pull away from those who are not part of the manipulator's world. It can feel so subtle at first, like just a little request here and there to spend time with them, to cancel plans with others, or to prioritize their needs. But over time, this builds into something much more dangerous. You start to realize that your time and energy are being drained, and you're left wondering why your once strong relationships with others are now fragile. Your friends may notice the changes, but you might find yourself defending the manipulator's actions, saying things like, "They're just really sensitive," or "They've been going through a tough time." Eventually, the isolation becomes so much a part of your daily life that it's hard to recognize what's happening. You might even start to think that your other relationships are the problem, rather than the manipulator's behavior. The longer this continues, the more emotionally dependent you become on the person who is manipulating you. And you may find yourself wondering, why do I feel like I'm losing touch with everyone I care about? The emotional impact of isolation is profound. Not only does it leave you feeling cut off from the people who care about you, but it also undermines your self-worth. You begin to feel like the manipulator is the only one who understands you, the only one who can truly make you feel validated. But what's happening is that you're being emotionally drained, and your identity is being shaped by someone who only wants you to rely on them. They're using your emotional needs to keep you dependent, and the longer this continues, the harder it is to break free. So, how do you stop this cycle of isolation? The first step is recognizing it. If you feel like someone is making you feel guilty for spending time with others or for prioritizing your relationships, it's a huge red flag. Healthy relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or familial, allow for independence and balance. You should never have to apologize for maintaining strong connections with others or for having your own social life. Next, you need to reestablish your boundaries. It's essential to communicate clearly with the manipulator, letting them know that your relationships with others are important to you. This might not be an easy conversation, especially if they've already manipulated you into believing that you shouldn't spend time with anyone but them. But setting boundaries is the first step to reclaiming your independence. Another key step is to strengthen your support system. If you've been isolated, it might feel like you've lost touch with the people who care about you. But the truth is, those connections are still there. They just need to be rekindled. Reach out to old friends, reconnect with family, and surround yourself with people who value and support you. Emotional manipulation thrives on isolation, so the more you have a support system, the harder it is for the manipulator to control you. Finally, remember that you are not responsible for the manipulator's feelings. You don't have to sacrifice your own relationships or happiness to please them. Real love is about mutual respect, understanding, and growth, not about controlling or isolating the other person. Isolation might seem like a small issue at first, but its effects are profound. It's a powerful tool used by manipulators to gain control over your life. But recognizing it is the first step in reclaiming your independence, your confidence, and your sense of self. And the moment you start setting boundaries and reconnecting with the people who genuinely care about you, you'll start to see the manipulator's grip loosen. Your emotional freedom is yours to take back. Playing the victim, gaining sympathy to control you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you cared about turned every issue into their problem? Maybe they constantly told you how difficult their life was, how everyone was out to get them, or how much they were suffering, making you feel guilty for not doing more to help. You might have found yourself apologizing for their struggles or trying to fix things that weren't even your fault. This is a tactic called playing the victim, and it's one of the most emotionally draining forms of manipulation. At its core, playing the victim is about gaining sympathy and using that sympathy to control the way you behave. The manipulator wants to make you feel like you're responsible for their emotions, their problems, or their happiness. They paint themselves as helpless or wronged, and in doing so, they shift the focus away from their own actions and onto you. Suddenly, you're the one who feels guilty for not doing enough, even when you're not the cause of their pain. Imagine this. You're having a conversation with a close friend or partner, and they start talking about how terrible their day has been. They complain about how everyone at work is against them, how their family doesn't appreciate them, and how no one seems to understand what they're going through. At first, you listen with empathy. You try to console them, offer advice, or simply be there to listen. But over time, you start noticing a pattern. Every time you're together, the focus seems to always be on their struggles, and no matter what you do, it never seems enough to make them feel better. What begins as a conversation about their difficulties gradually shifts into something more insidious. They start to say things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you. Everyone else has let me down." Or, "I'm so sorry, I'm always complaining, but you're the only one who understands me." These statements might seem innocent, but in reality, they're designed to make you feel responsible for their emotional well-being. They want you to believe that their happiness relies on you. They guilt-trip you into thinking that if you really cared, you would drop everything to help them. The problem is, their happiness is not your responsibility. What's dangerous about this tactic is that it's hard to recognize at first. After all, everyone has struggles. We all face challenges in life, and it's normal to seek support from those we care about. But when someone is constantly framing themselves as the victim, always shifting the blame to others or to circumstances, they are manipulating your emotions to make you feel responsible for them. They want to make you believe that without you, they would be lost, lonely, or broken. And the more you believe this, the more power they gain over you. Let's say you've been in a relationship where every issue, no matter how big or small, is always turned into their struggle. They may say things like, "You don't understand what I've been through," or "I'm just not good enough for you because of all the things I've had to endure." You start feeling like you can never ask for anything or express any needs of your own because it feels like their problems are always more pressing than yours. Your feelings are sidelined, and over time, you might begin to neglect your own emotional needs in favor of trying to fix theirs. This constant focus on their suffering keeps you in a position where you're constantly giving, whether it's your time, energy, or emotional support, while never really receiving anything in return. The manipulator wants to make sure you feel guilty for wanting anything for yourself. They want you to think that if you truly cared, you would always put them first. You may find yourself questioning your own boundaries, feeling like you can't say no, or feeling like you have to sacrifice your own happiness to make them feel better. And this, in turn, leaves you feeling drained and emotionally exhausted because you're giving all your energy to someone who isn't willing to take responsibility for their own feelings. The problem is that the manipulator is using you to fulfill their emotional needs while completely disregarding yours. They may act helpless, asking for your help or attention, but they're not really looking for solutions. They just want you to feel guilty for not doing more. This sets up a toxic dynamic where you are constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace and keep them happy, all while your own needs are being ignored. You feel emotionally responsible for their mood, and in doing so, you lose yourself. So how do you stop this cycle? The first step is to recognize the pattern. If someone is constantly portraying themselves as the victim, shifting blame onto you, or making you feel like you're responsible for their emotions, that's a huge red flag. You need to acknowledge that this behavior is not about them needing your help. It's about them trying to manipulate your emotions for their benefit. The next step is to set firm boundaries. You don't have to feel guilty for prioritizing your own needs or for taking time for yourself. It's okay to say, "I understand that you're going through a tough time, but I need to take care of my own emotional health too." If someone is constantly making you feel like their happiness depends on you, remind yourself that you are not responsible for their emotions. It's also crucial to stop feeling guilty for expressing your own feelings or asking for what you need. If someone reacts negatively to that, it's a sign that they're using their victim status as a way to manipulate you into meeting their needs. It's not your job to fix them. You have the right to express your own emotions and expect respect for your boundaries. Finally, if the person continues to play the victim and doesn't acknowledge your feelings, it may be time to evaluate the relationship. Is this person truly invested in a balanced relationship, Or are they just using you to fulfill their own emotional needs? Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and empathy, not on making one person responsible for the emotional well-being of the other. The key to breaking free from this manipulation is taking back control of your emotional health. Recognize when you're being emotionally manipulated, set boundaries, and understand that their happiness is not your responsibility. You don't need to carry the weight of their problems on your shoulders. True love and care come from a place of mutual respect and support, not from emotional manipulation. Subtle threats, the unspoken pressure. Have you ever been in a situation where someone doesn't need to say much, but their words still leave you feeling like there's an unspoken consequence hanging in the air? Maybe they don't directly threaten you, but you get the distinct sense that something bad will happen if you don't act the way they want. It's as if the threat is implied, not spoken, yet the weight of it still lingers. This is the power of subtle threats, a tactic that emotional manipulators use to make you feel afraid, uncertain, or pressured into doing things that benefit them. Unlike overt threats, which are loud and clear, subtle threats are more insidious. They might not come with an ultimatum or a promise of harm, but they are designed to instill fear, fear of rejection, of being abandoned, or of facing some consequence if you don't comply. The manipulator doesn't need to say, "If you don't do this, I'll leave you," or "You'll regret it if you don't," because the implication is enough to keep you on edge. Think about a time when you've been in a relationship or friendship, and someone made you feel like there would be consequences if you didn't meet their expectations. Maybe they said something like, "I guess you just don't care enough," or "I'll be really disappointed if you don't do this." These statements might seem like mild complaints, but underneath them, there's a subtle pressure, a threat to your emotional security. And over time, you start adjusting your behavior to avoid those comments, to avoid the discomfort of dealing with their unspoken disappointment. These kinds of threats often create a sense of emotional blackmail. The manipulator doesn't outright say, "If you don't do what I want, I'll hurt you," but they may say things like, "If you loved me, you'd understand," or "I thought you cared about me, but I guess I was wrong." The goal isn't necessarily to create an immediate confrontation. It's to make you feel guilty or anxious about not living up to their emotional needs. They use passive-aggressive tactics to manipulate your emotions without ever directly addressing what they want. For example, imagine you've been working really hard on a project, and your partner knows it's important to you. But instead of showing support, they say, "I guess you're too busy for me now." These words aren't a direct threat, but they are intended to make you feel guilty for not prioritizing them. They don't have to say, "I'll leave you if you keep this up," because the implication is enough to make you question whether your relationship is at risk. They've planted the seed of doubt, and now you feel compelled to alter your behavior to avoid this discomfort. The problem with subtle threats is that they create an atmosphere of constant tension. You find yourself walking on edge, trying to predict what will upset the manipulator. You start to feel like every action, every decision, is weighed against the fear of their disappointment or emotional reaction. You might even start apologizing for things that aren't your fault, just to avoid the uncomfortable silence or passive-aggressive remarks that follow. One of the most harmful aspects of these subtle threats is that they chip away at your emotional autonomy. They make you feel like you can't make decisions for yourself without considering how it will affect the other person. Over time, you may start neglecting your own needs and feelings because you're too focused on avoiding the emotional consequences of not meeting their expectations. The manipulator knows that by subtly threatening your emotional security, they can keep you emotionally invested in the relationship without ever having to make an explicit threat. For example, let's say you want to spend some time with your friends. You've been feeling stressed, and you know you need the break. But when you mention it, the manipulator doesn't say outright, "Don't go." Instead, they say, "I guess I'll just be here by myself again. You always choose them over me." It doesn't sound like a direct threat, but the emotional weight of the statement makes you feel guilty. Suddenly, what should be a harmless outing with friends becomes a dilemma. You start wondering if you're neglecting your partner or if they'll be upset with you. In reality, The manipulator doesn't want you to spend time with others because it reduces their control over you. They want to keep you in a state where you feel emotionally obligated to choose them over anyone else. Subtle threats work because they tap into your deepest fears, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of disappointing someone you care about, or the fear of losing love and affection. The manipulator doesn't need to raise their voice or give you an ultimatum. They simply use the fear of losing connection to maintain control. Over time, this leads to emotional exhaustion because you're constantly trying to anticipate their needs, suppress your own, and avoid the fallout from unspoken threats. So, how do you protect yourself from this form of manipulation? The first step is to recognize it. If you notice that someone is consistently making you feel guilty or anxious with indirect statements, especially ones that imply there will be consequences for your actions, that's a red flag. These subtle threats are designed to manipulate you, and it's crucial to acknowledge that they're happening. Your emotional well-being is just as important as anyone else's, and you have the right to set boundaries without feeling guilty. The next step is to address the behavior head-on. It might be uncomfortable, but it's important to express how the manipulator's comments make you feel. You might say something like, "When you say things like that, it makes me feel guilty for wanting to spend time with other people. I need to be able to have a life outside of this relationship, just like you do." By confronting the issue calmly, you remove the emotional power the manipulator has over you. You're not responding to the subtle threat with guilt or anxiety. Instead, you're taking control of the situation by expressing your needs. If the person continues to use these tactics despite your efforts to set boundaries, it may be time to reevaluate the relationship. Emotional manipulation is never healthy, and relationships built on subtle threats are not built on mutual respect. You deserve to be in a relationship where your emotional security isn't constantly under attack, and where both partners feel free to make their own decisions without the fear of unspoken consequences. Confusion and cognitive dissonance, overloading your mind. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt completely torn? Maybe you were dealing with conflicting emotions, unsure of what you were feeling or why you felt that way. One minute, you're angry or upset, and the next, you feel guilty for having those emotions at all. You might think you're just overreacting, or maybe you start doubting yourself and wondering, am I being too sensitive? Did I really have a right to feel this way? These feelings of confusion and self-doubt can be intentionally induced through a psychological process called cognitive dissonance, and it's one of the most powerful tools an emotional manipulator can use to control you. Cognitive dissonance happens when we're faced with two conflicting thoughts or beliefs, leaving us feeling uncomfortable, confused, or even anxious. In healthy situations, this dissonance can be resolved quickly. We acknowledge the conflict, process our emotions, and move on. But when it's used as a manipulation tactic, this discomfort can be intentionally triggered to cause you to question your own reality, your feelings, and your beliefs. Think about it. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone says one thing, but their actions tell you something completely different? Perhaps they tell you that they care about you deeply, but then their behavior shows a lack of respect, or they make promises they don't keep. The words and actions don't match, and it creates a sense of inner conflict. You're left thinking, which one is the truth? Do they really care about me, or am I just fooling myself? The discomfort caused by this contradiction is exactly what manipulators want. You're left second-guessing your own judgment, unsure of whether to trust your instincts. This confusion isn't an accident. Manipulators use cognitive dissonance to make you question what you know to be true, forcing you to rely on them for answers. They might tell you things like, "I never said that," "You're just imagining things," or "You're being too emotional about this." Each time they invalidate your thoughts or emotions, they create more dissonance in your mind, making you feel increasingly unsure of your own feelings and perceptions. And over time, this constant back and forth wears you down, leaving you feeling mentally and emotionally exhausted. Let's take an example. Suppose your partner consistently ignores your needs or is disrespectful towards you. But when you confront them, they tell you that you're overreacting, that they didn't mean to hurt you. and that everything is fine. The inconsistency between their actions and their words causes confusion. You start to wonder, am I really overreacting? Maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of nothing. This is cognitive dissonance at play. You want to believe that they care about you, but their behavior contradicts that belief, leaving you stuck in a mental tug-of-war. The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to trust your own feelings and judgments. Over time, this cognitive dissonance can make you feel disconnected from yourself. You begin to doubt whether your emotions are valid. You start thinking, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. Maybe I'm the one making this worse. And because of this constant internal conflict, you end up giving the manipulator the benefit of the doubt, ignoring your own needs and compromising your self-worth. The manipulator wins because you no longer trust your judgment. You begin to trust theirs instead. This inner conflict is exactly what they want. By causing dissonance, they make you feel like you need their approval or their validation to know what's real. And this keeps you emotionally dependent on them. You start doubting your own instincts, thinking that you need to ask for permission or seek confirmation before acting on your own desires or feelings. The manipulator knows that by keeping you confused, they keep you under their control. The emotional toll of this is significant. It can cause anxiety, self-doubt, and even depression. The constant back and forth creates a mental fog, making it difficult for you to make decisions or feel confident in your own choices. You end up questioning not just the manipulator's behavior, but your own reactions. You feel trapped in this cycle of confusion, unsure of whether what you're feeling is justified or whether you've misinterpreted everything. So, how do you recognize cognitive dissonance in your life? It starts with noticing when you're feeling conflicted about your own emotions. If someone's words and actions don't align, if they're making you doubt your own perceptions or feel guilty for expressing your truth, then you're likely experiencing cognitive dissonance. Recognizing this mental discomfort is the first step in breaking free from its grip. The next step is to trust yourself again. Your emotions are valid, and your perceptions are real. If something feels wrong, it's because something is wrong. You don't need to explain it away or justify it to anyone. When you feel the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, pause and reflect on the situation. Is there a contradiction between what you're being told and what you're experiencing? Are you being asked to ignore your own feelings and accept someone else's version of reality? If so, take a step back and evaluate the situation from a place of self-trust. It can also be helpful to talk things through with someone you trust. Sometimes, having an outside perspective can help you see things clearly when you're stuck in a cycle of self-doubt. Discussing your feelings and experiences with a friend, family member, or therapist can help you gain perspective on the situation and give you the confidence to trust your own judgment. Lastly, if you feel like your mind is constantly being overloaded with conflicting messages, it might be time to set boundaries with the manipulator. Let them know that you won't tolerate behavior that causes confusion or makes you feel guilty for expressing your feelings. Standing firm in your emotional truth is one of the most powerful ways to reclaim control in these situations. Cognitive dissonance is one of the most effective tools for emotional manipulation because it preys on your mind, causing internal conflict that makes you unsure of yourself. But once you recognize it and start trusting your own feelings again, you can begin to break free from the cycle of confusion and emotional dependence. Trust yourself. Your emotions are real, your perceptions are valid, and you have the right to live authentically without second-guessing your every move. Narcissism, the ultimate form of emotional manipulation. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship with someone who seems to constantly demand attention, validation, and admiration? Someone who believes the world revolves around them, and who can never admit when they're wrong. You might have been dealing with a narcissist, a person whose self-importance, need for control, and lack of empathy can make life emotionally exhausting and mentally draining. Narcissism isn't just about being self-centered. It's about using other people as tools to feed one's own ego and maintain a sense of superiority. A narcissist often has a grandiose sense of their own importance. They may believe they are special, unique, or entitled to the best of everything, whether it's attention, affection, or resources. But behind this inflated sense of self lies a deep insecurity. Narcissists need constant reassurance, admiration, and validation to maintain their fragile sense of self-worth. And if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you might find that they manipulate your emotions to ensure they always get what they want, whether that's through praise, attention, or outright control. In the early stages of a relationship, narcissists are often charming. They can be incredibly charismatic, drawing you in with their confidence, their flattery, and their attention. They might shower you with compliments, gifts, or acts of kindness, making you feel like you've found someone who truly understands and adores you. But the affection is conditional, based on how much you feed into their need for validation. As the relationship progresses, you may start noticing patterns. The narcissist's need for constant attention becomes more apparent. They might dismiss your feelings, belittle your achievements, or use you as a source of admiration and praise. When you try to express your own needs, they either ignore you, make you feel guilty, or accuse you of being too needy. They can't handle criticism or disagreement, often reacting with anger, dismissal, or defensiveness when you challenge them or try to set boundaries. The most damaging aspect of being in a relationship with a narcissist is their lack of empathy. They are unable or unwilling to understand or share in your emotions. They might completely disregard your feelings, leaving you feeling emotionally abandoned. You might feel like you're constantly trying to get them to see your side, but every effort feels like it's met with indifference or blame. The narcissist's world revolves around them, and your emotions, your needs, are secondary. They might even turn the situation around and make you feel like you're the one at fault for complaining or not giving them enough attention. But here's the real kicker. Narcissists have a way of making you believe that you're the problem. They're masters of manipulation, often gaslighting you into thinking you're too sensitive or that your reactions are exaggerated. You start to doubt yourself. Am I being too emotional? You wonder. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just too needy. The narcissist uses your vulnerabilities against you, making you question your reality and your worth. And all the while, they remain emotionally detached, always demanding more from you, but never giving in return. It's not just about selfishness, it's about emotional exploitation. Narcissists view relationships as transactions. What can you do for them? How can you feed their ego, and how much validation can you provide? When you can no longer meet their demands, they discard you or punish you with silent treatment, emotional withdrawal, or even verbal attacks. But as soon as you give them the attention they crave, they may suddenly switch back to being charming and affectionate, drawing you back into their web. This constant emotional roller coaster, where the narcissist gives you just enough affection to keep you hooked, but never enough to make you feel truly loved or valued, can leave you feeling mentally exhausted. You find yourself constantly trying to please them, constantly seeking validation, only to be left feeling empty and unappreciated. Your sense of self-worth becomes tied to their approval, and you begin to lose sight of who you are outside of the relationship. So, how can you recognize narcissistic manipulation in your life? First, notice if someone constantly demands your attention or praise. If they are always self-centered, with little regard for your needs or feelings, that's a red flag. If they make everything about them, leaving you to feel like an afterthought, it's time to step back and assess the relationship. You should never feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep them happy while neglecting your own emotional needs. Another key sign of narcissistic manipulation is emotional invalidation. If your feelings are consistently ignored, belittled, or dismissed, it's a major indicator that the person you're with is not emotionally available or supportive. Narcissists thrive on being the center of attention, and your emotions are an inconvenience to them. If every time you express yourself, you're met with dismissive comments or blame, the relationship is likely based on manipulation, not mutual respect. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to breaking free from narcissistic manipulation. You don't have to stay in a relationship where you're constantly emotionally drained, where your needs are ignored, and where your worth is defined by someone else's approval. Set boundaries. Protect your emotional well-being. Don't be afraid to seek help from trusted friends, family, or a therapist who can provide clarity and support. If the narcissist in your life continues to manipulate you, it might be time to consider walking away. Narcissistic relationships are not healthy, and they can leave lasting emotional scars. You deserve a relationship built on mutual respect, understanding, and empathy, not on emotional manipulation and control. And if you've been in a narcissistic relationship, it's important to rebuild your sense of self-worth. You are worthy of love that is consistent, genuine, and supportive. The only way to break free from the cycle of narcissistic manipulation is to reclaim your power and prioritize your own emotional needs. Building healthy boundaries, the key to protecting yourself. Have you ever found yourself caught in a cycle of saying yes when you desperately want to say no? Maybe you do it because you don't want to disappoint someone, or perhaps you're afraid that refusing could lead to conflict or even hurt feelings. It's common to feel this way, especially when we're conditioned to prioritize others over ourselves. But over time, constantly saying yes to other people's demands while neglecting your own needs can have serious emotional consequences. It leads to emotional exhaustion, where you feel like there's nothing left to give, not to yourself and not to others. The reality is, you do not have to sacrifice your emotional well-being for anyone else's happiness. Healthy boundaries are the cornerstone of emotional protection. When you set clear, healthy boundaries, you are safeguarding your emotional space, ensuring that you don't give more than you can offer without feeling drained or manipulated. Boundaries are not just about saying no when you don't want to do something. They are about understanding and respecting your emotional limits. When we don't have boundaries, we open ourselves up to emotional manipulation. Manipulators thrive in environments where boundaries are weak. They use guilt, emotional blackmail, and even threats to make you feel responsible for their happiness. Over time, you start feeling like you're walking around with an empty tank, as you give all your emotional energy to others and neglect your own needs. For example, maybe you're in a friendship or relationship where the other person constantly demands your time or emotional support. You might feel obligated to always be there for them, even when you're struggling to keep your own head above water. You start canceling your own plans to meet their needs, and before you know it, your relationships become imbalanced. When your emotional boundaries are compromised, it can leave you feeling depleted, disconnected, and even resentful. Imagine a scenario where you're in a relationship with someone who demands constant attention, yet never takes the time to care for your emotional needs. Over time, you begin to feel invisible, as though your feelings and needs don't matter. You may feel trapped in this dynamic, as if you can't escape the demands placed on you. That's the point where you realize your boundaries are being violated, and if you don't take action, you will continue to feel drained and overwhelmed. The first step towards setting healthy boundaries is self-awareness. It's about learning to check in with yourself regularly and asking questions like, how am I feeling right now? Is this situation making me uncomfortable? Am I compromising my emotional well-being for someone else's comfort? If you answer yes to any of these questions, it's a clear sign that a boundary needs to be set. Self-awareness means taking the time to notice when you're being pushed too far. It's also about recognizing that your needs, feelings, and energy are just as important as anyone else's. You are not responsible for someone else's happiness. Setting boundaries isn't about being harsh or rejecting others. It's about being clear about what you can give without depleting yourself. It's a practice of self-respect and self-love. Once you've identified where your boundaries need to be, the next step is communicating them clearly and assertively. Setting boundaries isn't about being rude or dismissive. It's about being honest and direct about what you're willing to tolerate. For example, if a friend is always asking for emotional support, but you're feeling overwhelmed, you can say, I care about you, but I'm feeling really drained right now. I need to take some time for myself. When you communicate boundaries, it's important to be firm, but kind. Let others know that while you value the relationship, you also need to prioritize your own well-being. You might be concerned about upsetting others when you set boundaries, But remember that it's healthy for people to understand and respect your limits. Anyone who truly cares for you will appreciate that you're taking care of yourself, and they will respect your boundaries. If they don't, that's a red flag, and it's something to reconsider in your relationship with them. One of the biggest challenges when setting boundaries is the fear of conflict. You might worry that by saying no or asserting your limits, you'll upset someone or cause tension. But the truth is, setting boundaries is a form of self-care. It's about honoring your emotional space, and it doesn't have to result in conflict. Healthy boundaries actually create healthier relationships. Remember, people who value you will respect your boundaries, even if they're initially disappointed. It's important to acknowledge that their feelings are their responsibility, just as your feelings are yours. If someone tries to guilt-trip you into abandoning your boundaries, that's an emotional manipulation tactic. And this is when it's vital to stand firm and remind them of the limits you've set. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, and that includes respecting each other's emotional needs. Toxic people often push boundaries to test how far they can go. If someone repeatedly crosses a line you've already established, it's important to reinforce your boundary. You don't owe anyone an explanation for taking care of yourself. If someone refuses to respect your boundary, that's a sign that the relationship may be unhealthy, and it's up to you to decide whether to continue engaging with that person. If someone tries to manipulate you by making you feel guilty for protecting your boundaries, recognize that as a form of emotional abuse. You are not responsible for their emotional reaction. You have the right to protect your space and well-being. A critical part of setting boundaries is learning to say no without guilt. Many people feel uncomfortable saying no, especially if they have been conditioned to be people pleasers or to seek approval. But the truth is, saying no is necessary for maintaining your emotional health. It's not selfish, it's essential. When you say no to something that doesn't align with your needs, you're making space for what truly matters to you. Over time, the more you practice saying no, the easier it becomes. You'll start to feel more confident in your ability to protect your emotional space, and as a result, your relationships will become healthier and more balanced. Setting and maintaining healthy boundaries is an ongoing process. As your needs evolve, so too will your boundaries. It's okay to reassess and adjust your boundaries as necessary. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're about creating healthy, respectful relationships where both parties' emotional needs are honored. Remember, healthy boundaries are a key part of protecting your emotional health. You have the right to have your own space, time, and well-being. Saying no is not a sign of selfishness. It's a sign of self-respect and emotional intelligence. By setting clear, firm boundaries, you are teaching others how to treat you, and you are ensuring that you don't lose yourself in the process of caring for others. Self-care, reclaiming your emotional well-being. Have you ever felt completely drained, like there's nothing left to give? Maybe you've been giving so much of yourself to others, offering support, time, and energy, that you've completely neglected your own well-being. It can be easy to lose sight of self-care, especially when you're focused on fulfilling the needs of those around you. But eventually, this pattern of neglect can leave you feeling emotionally exhausted, unmotivated, and disconnected from your true self. Self-care isn't just a trendy buzzword or an occasional indulgence. It's an essential practice, one that goes beyond the surface level of pampering yourself. True self-care means nourishing your mind, body, and soul so that you can regain balance, restore your emotional strength, and create a life that reflects your values and desires. In fact, if you've been stuck in an emotionally draining cycle, whether it's from toxic relationships or relentless responsibilities, it's even more crucial to make self-care a priority. Without it, you risk falling deeper into emotional depletion and burnout. The first step to reclaiming your emotional well-being is recognizing that you have the right to care for yourself. It can be difficult to make this shift, especially if you've been in environments where your needs were dismissed or ignored. If you've been used to putting everyone else first, it might feel selfish or uncomfortable to put yourself at the top of your priorities. But remember, self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. When you don't prioritize yourself, you become unable to care for others in a healthy, sustainable way. You'll give much more when your own emotional well-being is intact. Making time for self-care requires setting aside the guilt that often comes with taking a break. You may feel pressure to meet the demands of work, family, or friends, but it's important to understand that no one can operate at their best if they're emotionally drained. Just as you wouldn't expect a car to run without fuel, you can't expect yourself to keep giving when your emotional tank is empty. It's okay to say no to commitments or take a step back when you need time to recharge. In fact, doing so will make you more present and capable when it matters. The next essential component of self-care is recognizing how interconnected your physical and emotional health really are. When you're emotionally exhausted, it's easy to neglect your physical health, skipping meals, ignoring exercise, or sacrificing sleep. However, nurturing your body is one of the most powerful ways to restore emotional balance. Regular physical activity, adequate rest, and proper nutrition can significantly boost your mood, energy levels, and mental clarity. Exercise, in particular, is known for releasing endorphins, which are natural mood enhancers. By taking care of your body, you're directly enhancing your ability to handle emotional challenges. Mental self-care is just as important. It's easy to get caught in negative thought patterns, especially after experiencing emotional manipulation or trauma. However, taking time to clear your mind and practice mindfulness can help you regain emotional stability. Activities like journaling, meditation, or even simple breathing exercises can create a sense of peace and allow you to process overwhelming emotions. Journaling, in particular, helps you organize your thoughts and explore your feelings in a safe space, allowing for clarity and emotional release. It's an opportunity to check in with yourself and give voice to the things you may have been holding inside. Another powerful way to care for your mental health is through practicing gratitude. It's easy to focus on what's wrong or what's lacking in your life, especially when you're emotionally drained. But taking a moment each day to reflect on what you're grateful for, no matter how small, can shift your perspective. Gratitude is a simple yet effective tool to improve your mental well-being by helping you focus on positive aspects of your life, even during challenging times. The emotional side of self-care also involves connecting with others who are supportive and nurturing. If you've been in emotionally manipulative relationships, it's easy to become isolated and distrustful of others. But it's crucial to rebuild relationships with people who uplift you, respect your boundaries, and offer genuine care. These supportive connections serve as a reminder that you are worthy of love, understanding, and kindness. Spending time with people who make you feel safe and appreciated helps restore your confidence and emotional strength. In addition, self-care requires you to practice self-compassion. This means being kind to yourself, especially when you make mistakes or fall short of expectations. If you've been through emotionally abusive or manipulative relationships, you might carry guilt or self-blame. It's important to recognize that you are not responsible for the behavior of others. Practicing self-compassion means acknowledging your emotional wounds without harsh judgment and allowing yourself the grace to heal. Self-care also involves engaging in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. Whether it's a hobby, creative expression, or just time spent in nature, these activities nourish your soul and remind you of the things that bring happiness and peace to your life. You might have let go of your passions or interests while caring for others, but taking the time to reconnect with those things can be incredibly healing. Reclaiming your joy is a form of emotional empowerment that strengthens your resilience and helps you build a life that's more balanced. It's also important to remember that self-care is not a one-time event, but an ongoing practice. As your emotional needs change, so too will your self-care practices. What works for you today might need to be adjusted tomorrow, and that's okay. The key is remaining flexible and attuned to your needs. By continuously prioritizing self-care, you ensure that you are better equipped to handle life's challenges and setbacks. You deserve to live a life where your emotional health is nurtured and protected. Finally, self-care means accepting that you don't have to do everything alone. It's okay to seek help, whether through therapy, support groups, or talking to trusted friends and family. Healing from emotional manipulation can be a long process, and having a support system is essential. Professional help can provide guidance and strategies to rebuild your emotional strength, while supportive relationships offer the love and encouragement necessary for your healing journey. Emotional resilience, building strength after emotional manipulation. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where everything feels like it's falling apart, but you just can't seem to get back up? Perhaps it's after a toxic relationship, emotional manipulation, or a difficult experience that left you questioning everything about yourself. Emotional resilience, the ability to recover and move forward after emotional adversity, is a crucial skill. It's not about avoiding pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about developing the strength to navigate through life's storms and come out stronger on the other side. It's easy to feel broken after being emotionally manipulated. Your self-worth may have been chipped away, and the trust you once had in yourself and others might feel shattered. Rebuilding from this place of emotional fragility can seem impossible, but it's exactly at this point where resilience begins. Emotional resilience is the process of bouncing back, not to who you were before, but to a version of yourself that's stronger, wiser, and more aware of what you need to thrive. The journey of building emotional resilience starts with acknowledging the pain. Many people, especially after enduring emotional abuse or manipulation, try to push their feelings down and move on quickly. They tell themselves to get over it or move past it. But healing doesn't happen in a straight line. The first step is giving yourself permission to feel, whether that's hurt, anger, disappointment, or even confusion. Recognizing your emotions, without guilt or shame, is an act of self-compassion and the first step toward resilience. Once you've acknowledged your emotions, it's important to process them. This might mean talking to someone you trust, writing in a journal, or even seeking professional help. Processing your emotions allows you to understand them, and understanding them is the key to letting go of the negative feelings that hold you back. When you try to avoid or suppress your emotions, they can manifest in unhealthy ways, creating a cycle of emotional pain that's hard to escape. By facing those feelings head-on, you take back control over your emotional state and begin the path to healing. Resilience isn't about pretending you're fine or rushing through your feelings. It's about gradually moving through your emotional pain and emerging with a stronger sense of self. This process requires patience and time, but it's essential to give yourself the grace to heal at your own pace. Everyone's timeline for recovery is different, and it's important to honor your personal journey without comparing it to others. Another crucial aspect of building emotional resilience is learning to set boundaries. After being manipulated emotionally, it can be difficult to trust your own judgment. You might second-guess your decisions or feel unsure of what's right for you. This is where boundaries play a critical role. Boundaries help you define your emotional space and protect your mental health. They give you a clear sense of what you will and won't tolerate from others, and by setting them, you reinforce your ability to trust yourself again. One of the most empowering things you can do in the process of building emotional resilience is to reclaim your personal values. When you've been manipulated, it's easy to forget what truly matters to you. Manipulators often distort your sense of reality, making you question your needs and desires. Rediscovering your values, what you believe in, what you stand for, and what brings you joy, is a powerful way to rebuild your emotional foundation. Whether it's your career, relationships, or hobbies, reconnecting with what feels authentic to you will strengthen your emotional resilience. Building resilience also means developing healthy coping mechanisms. Life is always going to throw challenges your way, but how you respond to those challenges can determine whether you rise above them or remain stuck. Healthy coping strategies can include things like practicing mindfulness, engaging in creative activities, or maintaining physical health through exercise. These tools help you deal with stress, anxiety, and difficult emotions in constructive ways, rather than letting them control you. While resilience is a personal journey, it's also important to remember that you don't have to do it alone. In fact, building a strong support network is an essential part of emotional recovery. Surrounding yourself with people who uplift you, who understand your struggles, and who respect your boundaries is vital to rebuilding trust in others. These positive relationships provide a sense of security and remind you that you are worthy of love and respect. If you've been isolated or hurt by toxic people in the past, reestablishing connections with those who genuinely care for you can be a crucial step in your healing process. As you build resilience, it's also important to allow yourself to take risks again. Emotional manipulation or toxic relationships can create a sense of fear and doubt, leading you to avoid new experiences or connections. But resilience means stepping outside your comfort zone when you're ready. It doesn't mean rushing into new situations or forcing yourself to trust people immediately, but rather, it's about taking small, calculated risks that help you regain confidence in yourself and your ability to navigate challenges. Through this process, remember that resilience is not about returning to the person you were before. It's about evolving into someone who has learned from their experiences, who understands their own needs and limits, and who has the strength to continue moving forward, no matter how hard it gets. It's about discovering a new sense of inner strength, one that can weather any storm and still thrive. Emotional resilience isn't just a nice-to-have trait. It's essential for your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. It's the key to rebuilding trust in yourself, setting healthy boundaries, and creating a life that aligns with your true values. And while it's a long and sometimes painful journey, each step you take toward resilience is a step toward reclaiming your power and your peace. Rebuilding trust, healing after emotional manipulation. There's a saying that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But what if the damage to your trust wasn't just caused by one event, but by a series of emotional manipulations that eroded your confidence in yourself and others? After enduring emotional manipulation, it's common to feel like trust is something that's no longer possible for you. You might find yourself doubting not only others, but your own judgment and perceptions. Rebuilding trust, especially after betrayal, is a complex process, but it's also a necessary one. It's about learning to trust again, not only others, but, more importantly, yourself. The first step in rebuilding trust is recognizing the impact of emotional manipulation on your life. If you've been gaslighted or deceived, it's normal to feel unsure of what's real. Manipulative people often twist your reality, making you question your own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. The emotional damage can make you doubt yourself in ways that are deep and lasting. But acknowledging the hurt and the confusion is crucial to the healing process. It's okay to admit that you've been wronged, and it's okay to feel betrayed. Healing begins when you allow yourself to fully recognize the emotional wounds that need to be addressed. Once you've acknowledged the damage, it's important to rebuild trust in yourself. After being manipulated, it's easy to become distrustful of your own feelings and decisions. You may find yourself second-guessing everything, your choices, your instincts, and your ability to make the right decisions. This self-doubt is a common result of emotional manipulation, but it's important to remember that the manipulator is the one who distorted your perception, not you. Rebuilding self-trust requires you to affirm your ability to make sound decisions, even in the face of past betrayal. It means trusting your gut again and believing that you are capable of protecting your emotional well-being. One of the most empowering parts of rebuilding trust is understanding that your feelings are valid. You have every right to feel hurt, confused, and even angry. Trust isn't something that can be repaired overnight, but it starts with accepting that you are worthy of honest, trustworthy relationships. When you acknowledge that you deserve respect and loyalty, you can begin to heal and open yourself up to new connections without constantly fearing betrayal. To regain trust in others, it's essential to take a slow and measured approach. After being manipulated, it's natural to feel cautious or even skeptical about new relationships or situations. You may hesitate to trust people again, fearing that history will repeat itself. Rebuilding trust with others doesn't mean rushing back into relationships or allowing people to take advantage of you. It means giving yourself permission to take your time, to observe how others act, and to be discerning about who you allow into your life. It's also important to understand that trust must be earned, not given freely. In the aftermath of emotional manipulation, it's essential to set boundaries with others and take things at your own pace. Let people prove themselves over time through consistent actions. Words are easy to say, but actions speak louder. Watch how people treat you, how they respect your boundaries, and how they support your emotional needs. Trust is built on these consistent actions, not promises or empty word. Forgiving others is an essential part of the trust-building process, but it doesn't mean excusing their behavior. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the emotional grip their actions still have on you. By forgiving, you are releasing the emotional weight that keeps you tied to the past. You are choosing to reclaim your peace and move forward. This doesn't mean forgetting the harm done to you, but it does mean that you are no longer allowing that harm to control your life. Part of rebuilding trust is learning to communicate openly and honestly. When you've been manipulated, it can feel like your words were twisted or ignored, and it can be hard to express your true feelings. But rebuilding trust requires clear communication, especially about your needs and boundaries. Expressing yourself with honesty and vulnerability is an act of courage, and it's necessary for creating authentic, healthy relationships. By speaking your truth, you demonstrate that you value yourself and your emotions, and you set the tone for others to do the same. Another critical aspect of rebuilding trust is giving yourself permission to be vulnerable again. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, but it is actually a strength. To trust again, you must allow yourself to be open to new connections and experiences. Vulnerability means letting others in, even though there's a risk. It's about being willing to feel again, even though the fear of being hurt is still present. The more you allow yourself to be vulnerable, the more you rebuild your ability to trust, both in yourself and in others. Remember that rebuilding trust is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. As you learn to trust yourself and others again, you will encounter setbacks and moments of doubt. This is a normal part of the journey. Trust, once broken, can be fragile, and it takes time and patience to heal. But with every step you take, whether it's reaffirming your self-worth, setting healthy boundaries, or allowing yourself to open up, you are rebuilding trust in yourself and others. Ultimately, rebuilding trust is about reclaiming your emotional strength and choosing to believe in your ability to protect yourself, while also being open to positive, healthy relationships. It's about understanding that you are deserving of trust, and that by healing, you can create a future where your emotional needs are met with respect, honesty, and mutual care. Trust can be rebuilt. It just takes time, patience, and the willingness to step forward one step at a time. Seeking professional help, healing from emotional manipulation. Have you ever felt like you were stuck in a loop of emotional manipulation, no matter how hard you try to break free? You might have attempted setting boundaries, practicing self-care, or seeking advice from loved ones, but nothing seemed to make a real difference. Emotional manipulation has a way of digging deep, leaving you feeling trapped in a cycle where you're constantly giving, but never truly receiving the support you need. When this happens, seeking professional help may be the crucial step that helps you regain control and begin healing. There is no shame in reaching out for support. On the contrary, it takes immense courage to acknowledge when the emotional burden has become too heavy to carry on your own. Therapy or counseling offers a safe and structured space where you can begin to process the damage done by manipulation. These experiences often leave invisible scars, wounds that may not be immediately visible but can have long-lasting effects on your emotional health. Seeking professional help is not a sign of weakness, but an act of strength and a commitment to your well-being. When you seek therapy, you are not just looking for someone to listen. You are looking for guidance in untangling the complex web of emotions that emotional manipulation leaves behind. In manipulative situations, it's common to feel gaslight, confused, and unsure of what's real. A therapist can help you make sense of these mixed emotions, providing clarity about what happened and why you may feel disoriented or powerless. They can help you identify the patterns of manipulation that you might have missed while you were in the thick of the situation. One of the most powerful aspects of professional help is the opportunity to rebuild your self-worth. Emotional manipulators are skilled at making you feel inferior, guilty, or undeserving of respect and love. Over time, this can lead you to question your own self-worth. A therapist helps you rediscover your value, separate from the toxic influence of the manipulator. They guide you in learning to trust your feelings and judgment again, helping you recognize that you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is one of the most common approaches used to help people who have experienced emotional manipulation. CBT works by helping you identify and challenge negative thought patterns that result from manipulation. For example, manipulators often make you feel like you're too sensitive or that your needs don't matter. CBT helps you reframe these damaging thoughts and replace them with healthier, more positive beliefs. This is an essential step in regaining control over your emotional landscape and moving away from feelings of self-blame or inadequacy. Another approach that can be particularly helpful for those recovering from emotional manipulation is trauma-focused therapy. Emotional manipulation often leaves behind trauma that affects your ability to feel safe or trust others. Trauma-focused therapy helps you address and heal the wounds left by these experiences. It's about processing the emotional pain that comes from long-term manipulation and finding ways to restore your sense of safety and security. This type of therapy helps you not just cope, but truly heal from the emotional scars that manipulation has left behind. Support groups can also play a crucial role in your healing journey. If you've been manipulated, it's easy to feel isolated or ashamed of what you've gone through. Joining a support group where you can connect with others who have experienced similar situations can provide an immense sense of relief. It's a space where you are understood, where you can share your story without fear of judgment, and where you can gain valuable insights from others who are also working toward healing. These connections can help you feel less alone and provide hope that recovery is possible. Professional help also allows you to develop practical tools and coping strategies that can protect you from falling into manipulative relationships in the future. In therapy, you can learn how to set and maintain boundaries with others. You can practice saying no without guilt and learn how to recognize when someone is crossing your limits. A therapist will work with you to develop skills that allow you to protect your emotional space while still engaging in healthy relationships. It's important to recognize that healing from emotional manipulation doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that requires patience, self-compassion, and commitment. The emotional scars may not be immediately visible, but they are real, and it's essential to take the time to heal properly. Professional help provides you with the guidance, support, and tools needed to work through the complex emotions and trauma left behind by manipulation. Therapists and counselors offer a safe, non-judgmental space where you can explore your feelings and gain a deeper understanding of your experiences. They can help you develop a stronger sense of self-worth, guide you in setting healthier boundaries, and help you navigate the process of trusting yourself and others again. Finally, professional help can be a reminder that healing is not a solitary journey. While it's true that the work to heal must come from within, a therapist or counselor can provide the support and validation you need along the way. They help you rediscover your own strength so that you can move forward with confidence and clarity and build a future that's free from emotional manipulation, reclaiming your power and moving forward. Throughout this journey, we've explored the subtle yet powerful tactics of emotional manipulation and the impact they have on your well-being. Whether it's gaslighting, guilt tripping, love bombing, narcissistic abuse, or cognitive dissonance, each of these manipulative behaviors takes a toll on your emotional health, leaving you confused, drained, and unsure of your own worth. But the good news is that you are not defined by your past. Every experience, no matter how painful, holds the potential for growth and transformation. Healing from emotional manipulation is not a linear path, and it's not always easy. But by recognizing the tactics, setting boundaries, practicing self-care, and building emotional resilience, you can take back control of your life and reclaim your peace. It's crucial to remember that you are worthy of love, respect, and happiness, not just from others, but from yourself. Rebuilding trust, whether with others or with yourself, takes time and patience, but it is completely possible. The steps to healing may feel daunting at times, but each small action you take, whether it's setting a boundary or simply allowing yourself to feel, is a step toward emotional freedom. Don't be afraid to seek help from trusted friends, family, or a professional. Therapy, support groups, and self-reflection are powerful tools in helping you process pain, reconnect with yourself, and move forward. As you continue your journey toward emotional freedom, remember that you deserve to live a life that is fulfilling, healthy, and true to who you are. Emotional manipulation may have tried to shape your reality, but you have the power to reshape it. You are stronger than the manipulation, wiser than the lies, and braver than the fear. The healing process may take time, but with each step, you are reclaiming your peace, your self-worth, and your authentic self. In the end, you control your narrative. The past no longer has a hold on you. It's time to step into the future with clarity, strength, and the knowledge that you are enough, and you always have been.